Hi, my name is Pam Killeen, and welcome to my podcast, Circadian Reboot, where we will be discussing everything circadian. And today I'm pleased to announce that on the show we have Dr. Kelli Ritter. She is known as the Quantum Stress Doc. Kelli is a leading edge educator and clinician, always interested in growth, human potential, health, and well being. Kelli turns complex health ideas and research into practical tools that anyone can apply. Former associate professor and holistic psychotherapist turned nutritional therapist and quantum health educator, she has a wise and energized approach. One of the most passionate podcast hosts you will ever meet, Kelli reaches thousands of people each week on the Nourished Soul podcast. She is down to earth, literally earthing all the time, and has what you might call an immense walking around sense, as she writes here. Her greatest pleasure is helping people find the tools and inspiration to transform their lives. Welcome, Kelli, to my podcast today. It's just such a pleasure to have you here. I love the work that you're doing. It sort of rings a bell for me because when I was really, really sick for many, many years, of course, I had a lot of anxiety that had no label, but it manifested as insomnia, severe and debilitating insomnia. And I think, one of the missing pieces to the puzzle for my state at the time, and for many people, millions of people today, is that they are having trouble sleeping, and it's really because they're on high alert so much. And thanks to your research, as a quantum practitioner and a psychotherapist, you're piecing together some parts to the puzzle that really have been missing for many, many years and are very necessary in terms of people's healing. Can you maybe share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, thank you, Pam, for having me on. I'm excited to be here and talk to you. And like so many people, don't connect the anxiousness with what's going on. We try to solve the symptoms and we don't really realize what's actually happening in terms of danger signaling in the body. And people will go for the root cause and have such a hard time kind of finding the root because it's more simple, I think, than anybody would ever imagine. And for me, same. I mean, I looked at complicated things in ways that didn't need to be complicated because it's actually quite simple. And for me, what I've learned is there's some foundational strategies that need to be in place that actually help increase our voltage so that we literally have the energy and the voltage to be able to do some of the deeper work. But it cleans up a lot of the excessive worry and anxiousness and irritability and sleep issues and all of the things that people have been trying to solve for a long time using all kinds of things, medications,
Yep.
supplements, exercise, even diet doesn't really touch. It helps, but it's not gonna move the needle the same as the quantum health strategies.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a word for the work that you do. And I think about, you have to be physically strong to be emotionally strong. But it's so much deeper. The work that you do is so much deeper. And so I came up with the term quantum strength, that in order to override a lot of this anxiety, sleep issue, basically this bad mood epidemic that we're in, that I think we need to build our quantum strength. And that's what you do.
I love that. I was like, please do tell. This is like really important. I love when people tell me a word for what I do. Yeah, that's it. It's quantum strength. I talk a lot about stress resilience. And I think people think, oh, that sounds good, but I love quantum strength. You're really on a cellular level, on the tiniest of levels, building strength from the inside out. And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me of what we're actually doing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the word quantum is quite new for a lot of people.
Yes.
And it really comes down to tiny particles, like just the
Yeah.
tiniest of particles, right? Like it's something we
Yeah.
can't see, feel, touch necessarily, right? And that's what's affecting us at so many levels. And yet it's been highly regarded or highly ignored, for an eternity almost.
Right. And I think it's because, yeah, it is so small and people don't seem to think that it's important. And what we didn't realize is how these tiniest of subatomic particles or waves then are driving some of the bigger picture. And so it was overlooked. And I think now people are starting to go, oh, okay, this makes sense because you just intuitively know. Pam, when you were really sick and you kept saying there must be something missing, and then you're helping all these people with their healing, and it still feels like something's missing, and it's missing at a fundamental level. And I also think of quantum as the smallest changes we can make to have the biggest impact in our health, because we're not talking about really big things. It may take some effort, but it's not what people think, and it's so simple that I think people that's why I think it gets overlooked.
Yeah. And when I was sick, you're looking under every stone imaginable.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of psychotherapeutic modalities
Yeah.
to try and figure out what's causing this. Is this the dysfunctional family? Is this a trauma that I had? Is this, what is causing this? And I even did the Hoffman quadrinity process many, many years ago. Now, with me, I was exposed to a lot of mold as well, so that was the last straw for my body, and I collapsed. But I was, trying to figure out, is there an emotional connection here? And really didn't make much headway, going down that pathway. But now with the quantum strength, I think if we can build ourselves quantumly, then I think we can actually deal with any kind of trauma that we've been exposed to. And I congratulate you for, applying this into your practice.
Well, I did it because I was trying to help a loved one. So
Oh,
I didn't get here because of anything. Yeah, I was very, I would say, dismayed, I guess. You're trying to help people, and all of the traditional modalities, and I'd done all the trauma trainings you could do, and I felt like it was somewhat helpful for people. Then I went into nutrition thinking, oh, that's it. If we heal the gut, then we've got it. We're going to help people. And it still wasn't it, Pam. It was like, and then my youngest son started experiencing chronic anxiety, panic attacks, and nothing that I knew to do. We were doing all the things, and it just wasn't really working. It was helping him stay functional. But I mean, who wants to live half functional, moving through the world feeling awful every single day? That's just not. I was like, this has to be more. And that's when I found the applied quantum biology and started studying. And that is, you're right. Like all of these things that we've tried, and talk therapies and traumas. And I do think that I have a different view now that the trauma is important. When we cut off parts of ourselves and traumatic experiences and we shove that down, that's obviously that is going to create problems for us. It's going to create static within this electric body that we have. But
hmm
what I found is that until you actually restore these quantum, you restore the communication and the coherence in the body and actually raise the voltage, then you can start to deal with it much more effectively. You can utilize psychotherapy and other tools for trauma resolution, and it's just that it's so much more effective, is what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I mean, the more I talk to people about circadian health and applying the habits in their lives, they feel more grounded, they sleep better, they just seem more whole physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and just more in touch. They're not as agitated, and they make, sounder decisions and so on. So it affects us at many, many different levels when we apply these healthy circadian habits.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of sleep because I had terrible insomnia for many, many years. And, really, sleep is the essence. Without a good night's sleep, it's hard to have a really full day the next day, feel
It's
complete about it.
yeah, it's certainly hard to have a good mood. I mean, it's just hard to think. It's hard to have a good anything. So I agree with you. And sleep is a big issue for a lot of people. And we go about trying to solve it in ways that are minimally helpful at best.
Well, think about the melatonin industry,
Yeah.
right? And people are out there taking huge amounts of melatonin. Whether or not the pill actually has melatonin in it is a whole other story. But if
Mhm.
it were working, why do they have to keep taking it?
Right. And
It's obviously not working. Yeah.
I know. And there was a time that I was um, utilizing supplements, and now I do not recommend that people take anything that your body makes. So if your body can make it, that just we try to support the body in being able to make these different substances.
Hmm.
So for me, but it still took me a while, Pam, to understand that this was circadian. This was
Hmm.
circadian biology. I started really understanding mitochondrial health first and getting really interested in the light inside of us and how we can tend to that light. And like you said, it was very much this returning to yourself experience and feeling spiritually, mentally, emotionally more grounded. I had more mental clarity. My sleep I had good sleep, I thought, but my sleep was improving. So all of that was happening. And then I started understanding that our circadian rhythms are literally influencing every function or almost every function in the body. And so I still didn't quite connect that for a while. It took me a process of cleaning my brain so that then I could really start to put the pieces together. But I mean, it's obvious now. But I think
Yeah.
when people are new to it, they're like, wait, this is influencing because you think circadian rhythms and jet lag or travel and people think of sleep, but they don't realize that all these functions during the day and the melatonin is made in the body earlier in the day and it needs light exposure to actual real light from outside to be able to influence the processing of making our melatonin.
Right. It's not as simple as making your room dark at night. I mean, it starts earlier in the day, basically.
Correct. And I think even people, especially people with a lot of fear and anxiety at night, will leave lights on or a TV on or do these things. And because I understand, if especially if you experience some trauma at night, then your sleep and you're turning lights on, and that's not helping. But I think you're right. People don't realize it's not just about darkness because darkness and it actual real darkness, not partial darkness, but it needs to actually be dark for us to release the melatonin. But if you haven't made it earlier in the day from being exposed to light, then you don't even have it to release.
Yeah. Natural sunlight, just to be clear.
Yes, natural
Yeah.
sunlight, like the light from outside from our sun. Correct. Yeah.
It's just amazing, the sun phobia. I talked to all my guests about the sun phobia and how
Mhm.
it's just been so detrimental to our overall health, not just our physical health, but our mental and emotional health as well.
Yes. And I would say even I wasn't sun phobic. I just never sort of bought into it, but I still wasn't out there that much.
Hmm.
I would walk early in the morning when it was still dark because that's when my kids were asleep and I would meet my friend to get our exercise in. I was inside quite a bit. I was a professor, so I was teaching classes inside. I would teach at night. And I just had no idea, even though I wasn't afraid of the sun, I didn't realize how much I needed to be exposed to natural light by the sunlight during the day and more purposefully, more intentionally.
That's a good word, yeah, because I was out in the sun a lot too, Kelly. I mean, I knew not to wear hats, I knew not to wear suntan lotion. I
Hmm.
would wear prescription glasses, however, but I've stopped doing that.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and I couldn't wear suntan lotion because I was sick in my 20s and I had multiple chemical sensitivities. And so putting suntan lotion on was impossible. It made me so sick. So I knew by default, I couldn't wear this stuff. And anyway, but I knew that there was something inherently wrong with all the fear mongering about the sun. But
Yeah.
like you, it wasn't as intentional. My exposure to the sun wasn't as intentional as it should have been. So
Mhm.
yeah, I would go out, play tennis, play golf, walk, be out in the sun, but it wasn't systematic enough.
Right. Or it was on the weekends or on vacation, or it wasn't consistent enough for me. And so, yeah, I was in sunglasses because I thought all the cool kids were wearing their sunglasses, and I wanted to wear them too. And I never even really liked sunglasses. They don't look good on me. I have a small face. So I'm so glad that I got rid of my sunglasses now. I don't even think about them. But I think people are afraid, and that we've been told that it'll hurt your eyes. I get a lot of people commenting or asking me questions about, but doesn't it damage your eyes? And I think people need to understand that they can go very slowly, and that there's no UV and sunrise and sunset. And so you slowly build up your solar callus and you spend more and more time out there. And if you feel like you're sensitive, then you could put on a hat or sunglasses. You just don't want to do that all the time, because then you're blocking these frequencies of light that are helping your body know what time of day it is. That's what
Yeah.
tells the body when to make the hormones, when to make the neurotransmitters, when to release what. So
Yeah, we
you don't
talked
want to,
about melatonin. We talked
yeah,
about melatonin, but there's people taking a lot of, whether it's supplements or medications to support, say, their adrenals or their thyroid gland as well. And again, this still comes down to healthy light and avoiding
yeah,
the toxic, synthetic light.
uh-huh,
So all these exogenous sources that we're taking in,
yeah.
really, you don't necessarily need them, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know there's a process of, getting yourself in right relationship with your natural environment, and slowly weaning yourself off of these other things that you've been using. Um, you don't have to do it all cold turkey. I don't recommend that. I recommend that people take their time and really start to figure out how to support their body at a foundational level. And light, we are light, and the light outside of us influences the light inside of us.
Mhm. And
So,
how do your clients respond? I mean, do they come to you knowing that you're the light doctor, so to speak, or do they learn about it as they work with you? Like, how do they approach you?
so now most people know before they come. Yeah. It
Mm.
was tough when I was doing only psychotherapy. I will say that people would come for what they thought was traditional holistic psychotherapy, and they didn't want to talk about food and light and earth and magnetism. And now I think that shifted. So now I only work with people who are coming for the quantum health strategies, who want to have anxiety recovery. They've already done all the things. Most of the people who come to me have already tried the traditional stuff, even some of the alternative. It may not really be that alternative, but they've tried a lot of things. And so now they're really interested in opening themselves up to the quantum space and what else they can do. And many of the people who come are leveling up. So they have been able to control their symptoms, and they're pretty functional, but there's something they know that they're missing something, and they're still having a lot of stress and anxiety or anxiousness, irritability. Sleep is not where they want it to be. And interestingly, most people with anxiety also, or people who experience anxiety, also have digestive issues.
Mhm.
So a lot of people will come for gut healing, which is more about circadian rhythms than food. So,
Right. And
so they,
how does the
yeah.
sun, how does the light affect the digestion? Have you looked at it in some of
Hmm.
the literature, or is this a personal experience or experiences of your clients, for example, feedback from them? What is in the literature that describes the benefit of quantum healing and improved digestion?
Right. Well, there's not a ton of research, but there is some interesting research on circadian rhythms and gut dysfunction. So when we have disrupted, gut dysbiosis, like there's just an imbalance of the bacteria in our gut, or we have the thinning of the lining of our bacteria, of our gut, so intestinal permeability. So a lot of people will understand that, and we know we're going to have problems if we have that. Sinus issues, headaches, mental health issues, you're going to experience that. So most of the literature will look at gut healing from food, but there's some really good information about sunlight exposure, particularly on our abdomen, and red light and infrared light in particular. Infrared has been shown to diversify the gut microbiome. So that literature is there, that is available. And now we have more and more research that shows how the wrong light environment is affecting everything in the body. So it's just not that far of a leap to think about that from a gut health perspective. But it's slowly catching up. But most of what I've learned a little bit in the quantum health, looking at applied quantum biology, but mostly from just trial and error and having people utilize really just putting your belly outside in the red light when it's especially when it's in high concentration at sunrise and sunset. That's a great time for red and infrared. But sometimes we use panels too, the red light therapy panels, because some people they have a lot of inflammation, a lot of gut health problems. And so it's helpful to have that targeted help for people, or that targeted therapy. And that's how I know, because of
Yeah.
my own trial and error.
Yeah, I had Dr. Martin
Yeah.
Moreed on the show, and he cited the number, I think it's 30,000 studies or something like that has been published on light.
Yeah.
And how much of that research gets to people like you and me? I mean, it's just not, it hasn't been getting to us. And I know he says often that, we know about it, us scientists know about it, but we don't talk to our neighbors. And so that's
Yeah.
why I love doing these podcasts, and I love listening to podcasts with people like yourself because, finally the information is becoming more and more mainstream.
That's the hope. And I really enjoyed talking to Dr. Martin Moreed as well. And he makes no bones about it. He's like, no, the light is clearly connected to either health or disease. So I really appreciate that the information is getting out there, and that you're doing this, that we're all trying to spread the word, because you're right. I think it's even 36,000 papers and really good research. It's very
No, it's not
clear.
woo-woo.
It's
It's
not
definitely not
woo.
woo-woo.
It's clear. It's a very clear connection. So for it to trickle down so that people will start talking about this more and understanding how it's impacting them. And I'm really hoping that we can help our younger generations, because,
Mhm.
I've got these kids that are 19 and 21 now. And my 19-year-old was saying, Mom, these kids do not understand how much this is impacting them. And
Mhm.
so if we can start them younger, wearing their blue blockers at night and getting more light outside, being outside more, blocking that blue light at night,
Yeah.
I think we'll make headway.
I hope so. It's terrifying, with everything that went on in the last 4 or 5 years. I have a neighbor who keeps her children inside still. She's
Mm.
terrified of the fresh air and the sunshine, and
Wow.
I'm worried for those two children. They're very young, and she took everything so literally that her children's health will be compromised for the rest of their lives because of the choices that she made through all that fear mongering.
Yeah.
And she's not the only one. I've heard other stories of extremes like that.
Right. And I think the problem, Pam, is the more you're inside and the more you don't understand these things, then you're just making yourself sicker, more inflamed. Your metabolic health is going to you're not going to be able to think clearly. And it's compounding. So
Hmm.
is being outside. So the more you are out there and the more you correct these things, the faster you heal. I mean, it is rather quick. just putting your skin on the earth's surface, I mean, that alone is not hard to do and is so beneficial for us, that earthing practice. So I'm hoping that people will start doing that. I don't
Hmm.
know, because if you're not, then you're going to have a really hard time thinking for yourself. We're easily manipulated there.
Hmm. People don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how good they can feel. They just have no idea.
That's true.
And
And I I
mhm,
I was the same. I
mhm.
I thought I was pretty good. I had a really great diet. I was done all the things. I had no idea that I could feel so energized and clear-headed every morning.
Mhm. A
Yeah.
friend of mine sent me a video of a father who lives part-time in my city here in Canada, in London, Ontario. And I think he was traveling to Amsterdam for work or something like that. And he took a videotape of the streets. And here in London, Ontario, there's hardly anybody on the streets, hardly any children outside playing. And then he goes over to Europe. I think it was Amsterdam. And the children are running free, they're playing, there's no fear, they're having a great time. They may not even have parents watching them. It's sort of
Right.
like it was when I was in the 60s, like kids wanted to be outside. They fought to go back inside. And now we're dealing with an opposite environment. And it's got to change for these children to have a chance.
Well, yes, because we're seeing more mood issues, highest anxiety ever. I mean, we're seeing more and more cases of chronic stress and anxiety, this chronic cellular danger signaling that's happening for people, because nature is in and of itself sends safety signals to our cells. And so if you're not in it, you're not around it, and I think, well, I would say when we were younger, when you were younger and I was younger, there wasn't that much to do inside, so you might as well be outside. And I think we're going to have to figure out ways to just really make that exciting again for kids. And I think the children are will crave it and will quickly get it if we as adults can get us all back into right relationship with the nature that we are. I think the kids will come along really quickly.
I agree. I agree. And that's why these groups are so critical. And practitioners like yourself really have to work, even if it's just one-on-one or in group settings. I know you also teach a class about getting over anxiety and so on. I think you have one coming up in October, right?
Well, I have a
Um,
mentorship. I mentor
mhm.
practitioners, and I also, but yes, I have an anxiety recovery program. So we work and do group coaching. And I find there's something really special about groups, that I like the individual work too. It can be very helpful, but there's something really powerful about groups. So even just getting with like-minded people in your communities and doing this group, there's just a transfer of energy that can happen within a group. So yes, I do
And
all
then
that.
they share it with their friends and so on and so on. So it's a
And it
trickle
spreads.
effect. It's so critical with the level of anxiety going on out there, especially since what happened in 2020. I don't want to talk about it, but you know, but that level of anxiety, I mean, to sleep properly at night, you have to feel safe. And that safety just
Yeah.
went out the window. I mean, and so people
Yes.
have this residual effect, I think, from all the fear that went on after 2020. And so I don't know how you deal with that with your clients, but if they become quantumly strong, I suppose they can override a lot of the sensation that they suffered with through all that fear mongering.
That's exactly right. That's what happens. I love quantumly strong. I'm going to have to just steal that, Pam. And that's exactly what happened. And a lot of people started having this anxiety, like that felt like it was coming out of nowhere, particularly around health issues, but it had a very distinct flavor of doom, like there's impending doom. And this can be people who have not experienced much anxiety other than when you would expect to. We don't want anxiety to completely go away because it's a signal that we have something that's coming up that's important to us. So we can feel anxious about something and move through that very healthy in a healthy way, right? But this is where people started feeling chronically stressed and worried about their health, about the state of the world. Rightfully so. And we started becoming afraid of each other and afraid of afraid of nature. And I think, that when you become quantumly strong and you really start to see things, how we could ever become afraid of each other and nature is just mind-boggling.
Yeah,
But that's what was
mind-boggling.
happening. And that's
And then
still
putting us
happening.
inside, yeah, but putting us inside too forced us maybe to watch more screens, more blue light, right?
Yes. And not good for everybody. I
No.
think the people who came out on the better end of that deal, the people who came out unscathed are the people who spent that time outside and who were determined that they were going to use the time to on their own health and to eat well and and be outside and be in nature. I think those people did all right. And the
Yeah.
people who stayed inside are still struggling.
Hmm.
Some of
Now,
them.
what kind of advice do you give parents about their children? I know you talk about children quite a bit and have a lot of concerns, but what kind of advice do you give parents to encourage their children to go outside more? Is there anything specific that you can think of?
Well, I think they need to follow you. So the more you can be outside with them, and looking for rocks, digging. We used to say my kids were in the backyard digging to China. They were just digging holes. I mean, I think give them fun things to do outside. I'm always also asking myself, and I would say this to parents, could this be done outside? Could this meal happen outside? Could this, even if they're on a screen, could we take this outside? Could we take a call outside? Just start asking yourself, is there a way to spend more time outside, especially early morning? So the more parents I've worked with that get their kiddos outside before school, especially when it's not dark, like when there's light out there or cracking windows on the way to school or whatever they have to do to get that early morning light exposure around sunrise, and then blocking the blue light at night is really important. And the parents who do that have seen massive benefits in their families, massive behavioral changes in their children. And so when you model it and then you just make it a priority, we get our natural light and that's just what we do as a family. And there are all kinds of fun little things that you can do also when it's colder. And I have a friend that the kids take a mason jar of warm water and they dump it on the grass and then stand in it for their earthing in the morning to be outside. They're just fun things that you can do.
Oh, that's a great idea. Now, do you
Yeah.
have any schools or companies, corporations contacting you, asking you for some advice to convert their schools or buildings
Uh,
over?
no, not yet.
No.
Not really. I do have, some teachers that are finding ways, not whole schools and institutions at this point, but I think that would be, I hope that's where we're headed. I hope more people are going to be interested in healthy teachers and healthy staff and healthy kids.
And at this time of the year, I know that you have some strategies as well, as we're in the fall, moving towards winter, that you have some strategies to prepare for the winter or the colder weather that's coming to reset or stabilize your circadian patterns because summer is obviously going to render a different pattern than the winter. So what kind of strategies do you encourage people to do?
I really encourage people to embrace the season that you're in, not wish for a different season, because just embrace the one you're in. If you can eat local and seasonal foods, that information is orienting to the body. I just try to get people off the packages. Some people, it's just about just getting off the packages because that's very disorienting. But if you can eat local and seasonal food, that's also helping your body know what season it's in. And then it is really about being out in that early morning light and respecting the dark. Like, really, honestly, if you can, turn all the devices off as soon after sunset as you can. I know most people are like, it's too early. It starts to get earlier and earlier, and you're trying to push to work and do all the things. And I get that. But could you do it by candlelight? Can you at least wear blue blockers so that you're honoring the dark?
And you use them earlier, right? Like with the sun
Yeah,
setting earlier, you use the blue light blockers earlier in the evening, right? Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are really the tips, is it's honoring the light and the dark of the day.
Hmm.
Be out in the light of the day as much as you can, but then really utilizing the technology, biohack it if you have to. Wear those blue blocking glasses. And
Hmm.
I wear a sleep mask at night, which has taken it takes a while to get used to for some people, but I want it to be completely dark when I sleep. And so really that's a nice little thing that people can do if you don't have a completely dark room.
Hmm. Yeah, that can help. And
Yeah.
then you obviously use different light bulbs, or do you have the regular light bulbs and just turn them down at night or dim them, or how do you do
No.
that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people will argue with me. My light bulbs are warm. Okay, they still have the blue. So yes, I have lights on lamps with bulbs that have no blue light. So I have amber and red. We look like the red light district, I'm sure, to the neighbors outside. And my husband still refuses. He wants his TV on downstairs. So we have the lamps, and he has blue blockers, and we do the best that we can. But it's not just about dimming the lights. That's You're still gonna get some of that blue that you is telling your body that it's daytime when it's not.
Right. And I know you talk a lot about feeling connected versus
Yeah.
separateness. And some of these strategies could be perceived by some people as separating people from others, but I don't see it that way. I actually see it as a way to say, okay, we just need to discipline ourselves and set limits because we can't go out partying every single night, if we're going to be a circadian healthy person, right? So I suppose it's just really about balance. Like we want to go out late some nights and see our friends, but don't do it every night.
Well, and I
Yeah.
wear my blue blockers to concerts. I wear my blue blockers to the Super Bowl party. Like I just wear my blue blockers. I cover up, and I mean everybody knows that's just how I'm gonna go. But you're right. It's really about balance. It's about harmony, and this is returning yourself to yourself, so that ultimate oneness that you feel inside that helps you feel connected to everyone else. If your circadian timing is off, that is one of the biggest stressors on our body. So it's very difficult to feel connected and feel that sense of oneness and a felt sense of safety when you're not honoring your circadian rhythms. And it's going to be very difficult to have good connections with other people. Like there are just going to be rifts. And it's true, you're right. There are people that aren't going to understand that you aren't going out every night. And when you do, you're you do it in the summer and then you're home before dark, and you just make it a priority to really embrace the season that you're in and do your
Yeah.
best, because you
Yeah.
will need to go, the kids basketball games. That lighting is not good.
Hmm.
But you got to be there for the kiddos, and I get it. So you just put your blue blockers on and your hoodie and you do your best.
And what specific advice do you give to people who work midnight shifts? Because
Oh,
midnight shifts aren't going away, but some people, obviously they have to. They have to work their midnight shifts.
they have
What other
to.
strategies do you have for them?
That is really, really tough. So I really work with them to try and make sure that everything else is harmonized in terms of their food, getting their a lot of safety signals with a lot of nature when they are not working. And then really it's really tough when you have a night shift. It's disruptive to the body. Some people can wear blue blockers while they're at work, or they can have, it depends on what their work is. so
So
they
they could
can,
maybe have dim the lights if they can, wear
right,
the blue light blockers, and then when they get home at
mitigate.
7 a.m., do they eat or not eat?
I know that's the tough thing.
Yeah.
It is helpful if they can eat around sunrise or within 30 minutes or so of sunrise, and eat, just making sure they're getting nutrient dense foods, seasonal, local stuff, and then getting some light, natural light, when before they go to bed or when they, and I know it's really tough for people, but even if people have to get up, get a little light and go back to bed, if they've
Hmm.
got like a 2 a.m. shift or something, and so then it's really hard for them to get up, it's that's a tough situation to be
Very
in.
individual from the sounds of it. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
very individual, and I also think that there are things that you can do to mitigate with more red light and
Yes. And the
things
blue
like
light
that.
blockers. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah.
then what I know you're really big on vitality and energy, and I think a lot of people are probably listening that have relatively low vitality.
Yeah.
What types of strategies, like where do you go to really start this journey to help improve your vitality?
Yeah. I'm going to go with the light. I just keep telling
Yeah.
people get your light environment right because that will get your vibe right. And that people have a hard time. So start wherever you can start. But I will say what increased my vitality tenfold was when I really started blocking the blue light at night because I was doing a lot of getting out during the day. I was religious about getting up for sunrise and being outside for sunrise, but it took me a while to actually honor the dark because I was pushing it. And I think sometimes people push it. And so honor that. And then a lot of red light. So I started utilizing red light panel, and it really seemed to reduce the inflammation that I must have been experiencing because I had more energy and more vitality than ever before. And
And you do carnivore as well, right? So
I eat
more
an
or less,
animal.
yeah.
Well, I for 2.5 years I was carnivore, and I had so many improvements. It was great. But then the more I learned about mitochondria, and I was like, I really feel like some seasonal local produce is important for orienting the mitochondria. So I've added some produce to an animal based diet, but I just am really all about nutrients. And
Hmm.
even especially really healthy fat is full of electrons, which is really helpful to our vitality of our body. So I know we don't have time to go into why that necessarily is, but electrons, you can think of that as like money in the bank if the body's the bank. And so, really healthy fat, that's why I think a lot of people on a low carb, higher fat, ketogenic, high fat carnivore, part of what's happening there is they're getting all of those usable electrons that are helping their mitochondria.
Hmm.
So that will definitely help your vitality. But even that didn't take my vital. I mean, that wasn't as important as the light turned out to be.
Yeah, and that could be the missing piece of the puzzle because I'm hearing more stories about people who
Yeah.
are doing carnivore and they're like 2 years into it,
Mhm.
and it seems to backfire on them. And so there seems to, and without knowing each case individually, there
Right.
may be a light component to that.
There could be a light component, and it could also be that their body thinks they're in winter all the time. And if you're not in a really cold environment, because that's normally when we would have less produce naturally, we would do more fasting. We would do earlier dinners. If you try to eat before sunset, you're going to have earlier dinners in the winter. So it kind of winter lends itself to more of a keto carnivore fasting. And if you're in the summer, your body may just not be responding well because that doesn't make sense from a seasonal perspective.
True enough. True enough. And I think we're going to wind down here, but I have one more question for
Yeah.
you. And that is, what would your dream circadian day look like?
Yeah. Always rising just before sunrise. If you can, I know it's really hard in certain areas, but my dream day is to get up at dawn, Go outside for that early morning. Be out there for a solid 30 minutes or so during the early morning sunrise. Then I would have some breakfast so that my body, because food intake is a circadian input. And then I would walk the dog or take a walk around UVA when UVA becomes available, because that's most associated with mood and focus. So then being out, at least popping out for a little while during that. And then getting like light breaks during the day. If I could, I would be out there more of the time. And as the
And
least
barefoot
amount,
probably too. You're
barefoot
probably
and the
barefoot.
least
Yeah.
amount of clothing. That's exactly right. But you do what you can to pop out and get light during the day. And then I would be back in the evenings. I would probably be walking the dog or taking a little bit of a walk or being outside when that UVA is starting to wind down. Sunset is coming up, or is coming. It's coming up. The sun's not coming up. The sun's going down. But as you approach the sunset, I would be back out during that, and then I would block that blue light as soon as the sun's down. And I would also eat. I always eat pretty early anyway, but eat before the sun sets if you can, your last meal. Yeah,
And that's perfect. That's a perfect circadian day.
that's a perfect circadian day, yes.
In the life of the quantum stress doc, as you're known.
Mhm. Yeah, that's,
Well,
yeah.
I so appreciate your time and what you're doing, and I'll be putting your links below in the show notes. And I really hope that you can come back on another day. That would be lovely.
I would love it. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate all that you're doing to help spread the word.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch again really soon. And just keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you for taking your valuable time to join us today. The information provided on my website, community forum, and podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. We are not licensed medical professionals, and the content shared here is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are seeking health advice or have specific medical concerns, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified medical doctor or healthcare provider. They are trained to evaluate your individual health needs and provide personalized recommendations tailored to your unique circumstances. By accessing and using my website, participating in my member forum, or listening to my podcast, you agree to acknowledge and abide by this disclaimer. We do not assume any responsibility or liability for actions taken based on the information provided herein.